Let's see, moving on. Merlin Wonderboy is back again. With all of the big players in Hollywood being turned out for the knaves that they are, could there be a better time for a conservative coup to slip into producer slots and start making shows that show us the truth about leftist, socialist, fascism, sitcoms that make fun of burnouts? Merlin, they could take every single person who is a moral midget in Hollywood and throw them into a volcano. And there'd be an army of people waiting to take every one of those places with exactly the same ethics and exactly the same worldview. And behind them would be another army of people. The way to think of this is shark's teeth. You ever seen the inside of a shark's mouth? Many sharks, they have their row of teeth, and all of the other teeth are folded up in rows behind them. So when they lose a tooth, these teeth come out. They just keep coming. There's rows and rows and rows of teeth back there. And that's the way it is out here. It's not like, okay, somebody's no longer the head of Paramount Pictures. Now's our chance to put somebody in as the head of Paramount Pictures. The office is open. Let's get a conservative to run the Weinstein Company. It doesn't work like that. And if you think that the people who are going to be taking over for these dirtbags are any less dirtbags themselves, then you're wrong. They've been training under dirtbags like Kevin Spacey and Harvey Weinstein and all the rest, and they've learned how to do it. They haven't been caught yet because they're not high profile enough. They'll back down and they'll take it. They'll slow it down for a while until it wears over. And it will. Harvey Weinstein, I remember, was saying, this to give you an idea, number one, of how narcissistic he is, number two, how desperate he is, and number three, how clueless he is. Right around the time Harvey was being thrown out of his own company, he was making the pitch, basically saying, who better than me to go out there and be a spokesperson for women's issues? I'll just be a spokesperson for women's issues. I'll go on Oprah and I'll throw myself on my sword and do the apology tour. I'll do the Hugh Grant "It's all my fault. How could I ever forgive myself, let alone you forgive me" tour. And Harvey Weinstein will be the spokesperson for women's issues. Who better than him, according to him? House of Cards canceled as soon as that revelation about Spacey came out. And as I said before, that's not just Kevin Spacey now is out of a job. He doesn't need the money. There's 50, 60, 100 people who are also out of a job as a result of Kevin Spacey groping a teenage boy. And those people have jobs and lives as well, and now they're out of work. I'm sorry to be the person to break this to you, but the machine is not built that way. There are never any vacancies in the machine. There's never, hey, we need somebody here. There are people who are working in the mailroom whose entire goal is to be the president of that company, and the more ruthless and immoral they are, the more they're going to succeed. Producing movies is unlike any other job in the world that I'm aware of. You want to talk about a job that values ruthlessness. It doesn't just value ruthlessness. It doesn't just value immorality. It promotes anti-morality. The whole business is about smiling, shaking hands with people, and then trying to knife them as they sleep. One small example that I think I've mentioned before of how this thing works is somebody in Paramount, let's say, will get a really good script, just a terrific script. And Paramount's decided, we don't have any place for this on our slate, and we don't have any place for this on our slate for the foreseeable future. However, we are going to buy that script. And we're going to buy the script because we don't want anybody else to get it. So we're going to buy it, and it's going to sit on our shelves forever. And the guy who wrote it will get a little check, 50 grand, 100 grand. If it's a known name, maybe 200-300 grand, but probably 40, 50 grand, somewhere around there, which he'll be very grateful for. And that work of art that he's created, that masterpiece, is going to sit on a shelf someplace in the basement at Paramount Pictures and never going to be seen by anybody. This is a small example of what happens pretty much all the time out here. When people say, well, and this is an important point, I think. When people say, well, now we're going to get a non-dirtbag Hollywood or somehow a less degenerate Hollywood, you're missing the point. It's not that there are degenerates filling Hollywood positions. Hollywood was created for degenerates to have power. That's why it's here. That's how it works. T-Dog lies there in the comment section, says Joss Whedon was called out by his wife for having several affairs. So Joss Whedon is having all these affairs on his wife, and at the same time, he's a spokesman for women and damning Republicans for how badly they treat females, because he is a liberal. And that means he can have all the affairs he wants to, destroy his wife's life, make her miserable, and then go out and be a champion of women's issues, and that way you get your cake and eat it too. And he also has that same opportunity with the characters he writes, most specifically Mal Reynolds, but everybody on Firefly and many other cases as well, Iron Man, all the rest of these things. Joss Whedon writes conservatively. Mal Reynolds is the most conservative libertarian character I've ever seen. And I wasn't a huge fan of the show. I haven't even seen all the episodes. But he's a great character, and Nathan Fillion did a great job with him. But when Joss Whedon was speaking through him, you could hear the real Joss Whedon. But that guy is not allowed to be that guy, so he has to be the guy that Harvey Weinstein is. And all of them. With some exceptions I could name, and most of those exceptions are conservatives in Hollywood. Gary Sinise, just for example, as far as I know, I don't look in Gary's window and I don't have any idea, but I knew him pretty well for 5 or 6 years. Every time I saw him out on the town, he was either with his wife or by himself. And he struck me as a very good man. He still strikes me that way. He goes and gives concert tours. He takes Lieutenant Dan Band out, I don't know how many times a year, 20, 30, 40 times a year. And he did it while he was working a full-time as a, CSI New York. That is a grinding schedule. And he would take his free time, go out there, and entertain the troops. And two things about that. He would go to dangerous places like Afghanistan and Iraq at the time, which is admirable. But he'd also go to places like Fort Leavenworth, Kansas or whatever, which is even more admirable because those people are in the military too. And he's a good man. And he's, as far as I can see, he's not a part of this kind of thing. He's just built differently. But you can count those people on one hand, right? John Voight, Gary Sinise, Clint Eastwood, of all people, Powers Booth, Tom Selleck. And I could probably add a couple more, but not a whole lot more. So, no, we're not going to be taking over Hollywood. And while technically it's possible to tell stories that are essentially conservative stories, all good storytelling is conservative because it's about an individual fighting against a faceless power. And when I say fighting, I mean fighting. So it is, I'm modifying my language here. I was going to say it's possible to make movies like this outside of Hollywood, but then we run up against the problem we've been talking about all night, and that is in order to do that, you have to have some money. And in order to have some money to make those movies, somebody has to give you some money, and nobody on the conservative side of this argument wants to do that unless they are guaranteed a big return. And you can't do that in movies. I think I mentioned this maybe once before on the show. It's one of my favorite stories, apparently a true story. When I was doing Sunday Morning Shootout, I was an editor for that show, Peter Bart and Peter Gruber. Peter Bart was Adam Baldwin, yes, Arcturn. Peter Bart was the editor of Variety. Peter Gruber was a producer who basically sold Universal to the Japanese. He and his partner, Mark Peters, I want to say. And for this deal, each one of them made $750 million. But put that aside for a second. When they were trying to broker the deal, or maybe right after they'd closed the deal or whatever, Goober and Peters went over to Tokyo and sat in a boardroom with the head of Sony, who had just bought, or who was it that bought Universal first? I don't think it was Sony. No, it was somebody else. Whoever. Let's just say it was Sony. And he sat there with a bunch of Japanese businessmen. And these guys are guys who make electronics and cars and things like that. And so they asked Goober what they thought the chances and what the returns and everything looked like for the coming year. And Goober said to them, well, here's how it works. Any given studio, like the one you just bought or about to buy, for example, has a slate of movies. Let's just say, for the sake of the argument, we're going to do 10 movies in a year. That's about the number, somewhere around there. Of that 10 movies, 3 of them will be hits, 4 of them will be okay, and 3 of them will be bombs. And without missing a beat and not being funny in any way, deadly serious, this chairman of this Japanese board just said, well, why don't you just make the hits? And that's the kind of business it is. Why don't you just make the hits? We're going to produce a video for Prel shampoo, and it's going to go viral. It's not going to go viral, number one. And number two, nobody knows what makes something go viral. You know it when you see it, but you can't make it. You can't just say, oh, this is going to be a viral video. I see everybody saying that all the time. This is a viral video. We're going to do a viral video. We're going to do it. No, you're going to try to make a video that's interesting. I don't know what the number one video on YouTube is now. It may have been, give me a second. Gangnam Style, a Psy song, a Korean song. And I know that was seen by billions of people. And it deserved to be, because it was fantastic. It was really great. It was fresh and really different, not in English, and it was seen by billions and billions of people. And that came out of nowhere. And pretty much has not had anything like that kind of sense since then. So there you go.